You're live.
Great, thank you. Welcome back to the Vermont House Appropriations Committee. It is Wednesday, February 22nd. It's a little bit after 10 o'clock, and our next budget that we're going to hear is from the Public Utilities Commission. And I don't think we've had you in during, did we have you in during budget adjustment? And I apologize for not. But we could.
We had
Not the PUC, we have
The
Public Service Department.
Department.
right, yeah.
All right. So why don't we go around and introduce ourselves and then follow up with your introduction of you and your team, and then we'll anxiously look forward to listening to your budget. So I'm Representative Diane Ladfer. I live in Virgins and I represent Addison 3. Representative Shy is from Middlebury, right to my next, and then
Pat Brennan from Colchester.
Tiff Bloomley from Burlington, Tristan Tolino from Brattleboro.
I'm Carrie Dillon from Waitsfield, and I represent Duxbury, Facein, Moortown, Waitsfield, and Warren. Good to see you.
Hi, I'm Lynn Dickinson. I represent St. Albans Town.
Hi, I'm Mark Mahaly, and I represent Calais, Plainfield, and Marshfield.
Woody Page from Newport, and to my left would be Trevor Squirrel from Underhill, and to my right would be Rebecca Holcomb from
Norwich.
Good morning. I'm happy as Representative Page gets to do 3 introductions. Jim Harrison, Chittenden, Mendon, Killington, and Pittsfield. Welcome.
great. And Representative Pat is from Energy, Environment and Energy.
Energy is what we're called this year.
So welcome to our room and thank you for coming down.
Thank you.
So please introduce yourselves.
Good morning. I'm always delighted to appear before the Appropriations Committee because it gives me a chance to brag about my staff, and we don't often get that opportunity. My name is Anthony Roisman. I'm the chair of the Vermont Public Utility Commission. With me today are Ann Bishop, who's our Director of Operations, and Karen Hutchison, who's our Business Manager. It is the job of the Public Utility Commission, which is an independent quasi-judicial agency funded solely by gross receipts tax on the people who we regulate and fees paid by applicants for certificates of public good. We do not have any general funds. So we are self-funded and have been since the inception. We regulate the utilities in the state that cover electricity, gas, energy efficiency, telecommunications, cable television, terms of service only, not rates, water, and large wastewater companies. We often receive requests for certificates of public good or CPGs, authorizing the construction of electric transmission, natural gas transmission, and electric generation facilities of all sizes, from those that you see on individual roofs to those that cover acres of property. We have 14 hearing officers. We have a staff of administrative people of 7. And our size has remained essentially unchanged over the last 20 plus years. Nonetheless, we continue to increase the amount of work that we produce, thanks to 1, the interest of the public in the issues that we are addressing, and 2, thanks to all of you who add to the programs of the Public Utility Commission, programs that you feel and we feel we can best implement. So for example, in FY22, we had over 4,500 new cases filed with us. Over 15,000 filings were made in our electronic data document system called EPUC. More than 104 hearings and workshops were held. More than 2,000 orders and certificates of public good were issued, and more than 3,000 net metering registration certificates of public good were issued. In doing all that work with the same small staff, we still managed to have 95% of the cases disposed of or otherwise resolved within established timeframes. Public inquiries and information requests were met 93% of the time within timeframes, and net metering registration cases resolved within the established timeframes in 98% of the cases. So, as I said at the outset, we are very proud of the people who work for us. And as you will see from our budget, a substantial portion, over 80%, is devoted to paying salaries and benefits to these dedicated public servants. Our FY24 budget represents an increase of a little over $350,000 from our prior FY23 budget, or about 8.2%. Half of that increase is due to increases in benefit costs, internal service funds, and higher COLAs than were included in our original FY23 budget. $143,000 of the increase, about 39%, is due to increase in benefit costs and internal service funds. The internal service funds, as you know, are the funds that are charged to each agency in the state, including us, by other agencies in the state for services that they provide. BGS and ADS and Department of Human Resources are the primary agencies that service us. And I will tell you, they do an amazing job, and we are quite pleased to have their support. Just as a side note, you may have read or learned that a couple of weeks ago, as a result of a broken pipe in the floor above our offices at 112 State Street, our offices, one corner of which were significantly damaged by essentially floodwaters. And the BGS has been extremely efficient and effective in addressing the damage that was done, to the point of removing sheetrock and insulation to make sure that there was no danger of lingering moisture, and that the offices would be able to be rebuilt and restored, and that the building itself would be safe. We're hopeful that we will get the green light, maybe by the end of this week, certainly by next week, from BGS, that it's safe to return. Ms. Bishop, who's with me this morning, is one of the victims. So if you want to know how bad it is, I'm sure she will be maybe not happy, but willing to share with you both the damage and the effectiveness of what BGS has been doing for us. But we pay for those services, and that's part of our budget that technically we don't control. That's controlled elsewhere. The 13% of the increase, or about $50,000, is due to the higher COLAs. There are no new initiatives included in our FY24 budget. That, of course, assumes that the legislature in this session does not ask us to do things that we have not yet prepared for, in the sense of having budget monies. We see some potential changes and are prepared to accept those challenges when they come, but they may require budget adjustments if they come to fruition.
So, sir, let me interrupt you for a second.
Sure.
Are you aware of anything on the horizon that might go in that direction?
Yes, the proposed clean heat standard legislation.
There you go.
Gives us a task and includes in it funds to cover the cost of the work that we would be taking on, and primarily the hiring of 3 additional people to carry out those very important tasks under that legislation. As now proposed, that money would be general funds rather than the current practice, which is that the people who are seeking or who are being regulated by us pay us directly in a gross receipts tax or a registration fee for the work that we will be doing. But that's probably the single biggest item, Madam Chair.
Okay, so, all right, thank you. We'll keep an eye on that.
Okay. We do not have access to the Pay Act, and we must self-fund our salary increases. And in previous years, our proposed budget included, excuse me, I've survived everything else here, COVID and everything else, but I haven't survived the latest virus. So excuse me if my voice gets a little froggy.
I appreciate your willingness to be here. We've managed to go, or at least I have, and a couple of people here earlier on in the session have something that lingered for a very long time.
Well, I'm hoping that it's I that will linger for a very long time rather than this virus. In any event, normally we would have included salary increases as part of our budget, but this year the administration removed the proposed FY24 budget annualization of any estimated merit increases, and we have taken those out of the budget as requested. If those were included, these are merit increases primarily to our exempt employees. The budget would be $53,000 higher. Those are projected merit increases based upon our experience in previous years of the merit increases for our employees.
Sir, I don't mean to interrupt. Can you repeat that? So you had put in for what you would traditionally be as a merit increase?
Right. Our employees regularly, and they're obviously not all the same number, but it's different for different employees. But on average, the employees receive a merit increase each year. And we have traditionally projected into our budget for the coming year roughly what those merit increases were in the previous year. And we did that initially in this budget. And then the administration had directed us to take out the proposed FY24, the annualization of an estimated merit increase. And we took that out. And the dollar difference, if we had left it in, would have been an additional $53,000 in our budget.
53.3. This is Representative Dolan. Is this your?
Yes.
This is your. All right. So you're going to track that. All right. And find out what happened. Okay.
All right. So
there it is.
The net result of this budget is that the total monies that we will see from the gross receipts tax projected and the registration fees also projected is that there will be a shortfall between what we take in and what we will spend. Happily, thanks to primarily the efforts of my predecessors over the last 15 or 20 years, the commission has built up a reserve, the primary function of which is twofold. One, special projects that need to take place are funded out of that reserve. A good example of that is the electronic data management system that we put in place back in 2017 called EPUC, which I will say I think is probably the best data management system operation in the state government today. It is easily accessible by the public, and they do access it regularly. Easy for users to put documents into it, take documents from it and review them and so forth and so on. That was a significant expense. And now it becomes a line item for continued maintenance and so forth. So that's one item. And the second is Act 174 of many years ago directed the commission to first study and then act on recommendations to increase the ease and extent of public participation. A key component of that recommendation was that we should update our hearing room to make it more easily usable by the public. We're in the process of doing that now, and that item was budgeted in years ago, and I'm happy to say that we expect in 2023 that the project will be completed and we will be almost right on our initial budget projections, which is a real credit to the work of our business manager and our director of operations, and again, to BGS, who has been overseeing the entire project. We've completed the physical construction work in the hearing room, and we are awaiting the installation of the electronic equipment, which will allow people anywhere in the state of Vermont, for that matter, anywhere in the world, to participate actively in a proceeding without physically being in Montpelier and to observe what we are doing. And by the way, we expect to be using the same Zoom technology that the legislature has explored and now implemented. And thanks to your staff for giving us a preview of how effectively you found it to work. So that again is a significant item, and it is not in our budget as such, but comes out of our reserves. So those reserves also serve the function of smoothing, a concept that our utilities regularly use when deciding on what kind of rates to charge their customers. We need to smooth our income so that we are able to continue to function at the level at which we function, even when market conditions, such as the pandemic, or major changes in the business of utilities, the most significant of which is the electrification of so many things that were not being done electrically before, and the reduction in the use of fossil fuels in the state. So we're now in sort of a trough. And as a result, over the last several years, we have utilized our reserves, 25,000 in FY17, 100,000 in FY18, 3,300 in FY19, and 105,000 in FY22. The reserve is roughly $4.5 million, and it has been built up over the years because when windfalls happen, such as there was a federal stimulus grant money many years ago called ARRA that funded 3 staff for 4 years. We did not spend those on wild parties or elaborate redecorating of our offices. Like the smart squirrel, we put the nuts away, and now we're in a lean winter and we're able to tap into it. So we have the money and are able to use it. The budget reflects the extent to which we will probably need to use it this year, assuming that the estimates on our gross receipts tax and registration numbers turn out to be correct. And they have been pretty accurate in prior years, although there's the possibility of a real surge in some of the electrification projects that could greatly increase the amount of gross receipts tax paid by our electric utilities. Okay, lastly, we have some challenges like all agencies, and we have anticipated that. One challenge that we were able to meet and very effectively was the pandemic and the shutdown of the government offices, because of the ETUC system, we were able essentially seamlessly to continue business as usual with every one of our employees working remotely. We have them able to continue to do that. And once the emergency is lifted and our offices are cleaned as a result of the flooding, we will be able to reopen the office. Thanks to the experience we had with the remote work, we're now able to provide, and our staff, pursuant to regulations from Human Resources, is able to work completely remotely if they choose. We have a couple who have chosen that, to hybrid, remotely sometimes, in person other times. And that challenge will be met by what we've already learned from our experience during the pandemic. The in-person hearings was the way we always did our work previously. And now, once the hearing room is completed, we will be able to have more of them done as hybrid hearings. We would expect the commission and our hearing officers will probably conduct the hearings in the hearing room. But for someone who lives some distance away, say, for example, in Vergennes, if they want to participate actively in our proceedings rather than driving to Montpelier, they will be able to do so from their homes or home offices and be as effective as a participant in the proceeding, as a witness or as a representative of a party, as they would be if they were sitting at the hearing room in Montpelier. These remote proceedings seem to be working well, and we've really not had any major concerns except where people have problems with internet connection. And as I know you know, there's now substantial funds and a significant emphasis to improve the amount of broadband across the state of Vermont. And so it's increasingly possible for anyone anywhere in the state to actively participate in a proceeding that's remote from them, assuming the agency that's running the proceeding has the necessary procedures. So that pretty well covers the high points, and we've given you, of course, written information, and we will be, of course, happy to answer questions. Before we do that, at the risk, it's always a risk to disagree with anything that a legislator says, and particularly one in an appropriations committee. But we did overhear your conversations before this proceeding went live, and there are other continuing public interest law firms in Washington, D.C., including the Berlin Reisman Kessler firm, which I was proud to be part of, that now operates under the name Harman Curran. But I'm well familiar with the work of the Berlin firm, and it was always a pleasure to work on the same side of the street.
Nice. Any questions? Representative Mahaly?
Good morning. Good morning, Commissioner.
Good morning.
You said that you had a slight deficit, but you have the $4.5 million reserve. What was the deficit between the anticipated operations of and the anticipated income?
Oh, the anticipated deficit is 364. No, I'm sorry. Strike that.
Mr. Chair, would you like me to answer that question?
Yeah, yes. Why don't I, rather than try to be as smart as my staff, I'll let my staff do it. And please.
We're expecting about $290,000 deficit in FY24.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm not on my notes. Did you have a question, sir?
No, I
No,
didn't.
okay. Representative Dolan.
Hi, good morning. Just checking the clock to make sure it's still morning. And good to see you. When you talk about a deficit and you've been fortunate to rely on a reserve fund, there's an opportunity cost for that, obviously. When there may be some expenses or anticipated projects that you can't address because you're needing to rely on that reserve fund. And from what I heard today, the reserve fund is really for those special projects, not to fill holes. So in the past, how have you addressed deficits? Have you been in this situation before? And is it a function of the fees or the, as you say, the gross receipts tax? And if it's the latter, when was the last time that was adjusted to ensure that you're made whole?
Okay. First of all, the use of the reserves to make up for deficit on income has only started in very recent years. As I indicated, it started at around 2017. During the time that I've been here, which is started in 2017, I do not think there is any project or work that we needed to do or felt we wanted to do that we felt constrained to do because it was beyond what our quote income for that particular fiscal year would be, because we had the reserve available. That said, I think that you are correct that the goal of the reserve is not to simply every year increase the amount of our spending beyond the amount of our income. And if we felt that the current gap between those two was going to continue, I think we'd have to make some changes. Our best judgment, based largely on information provided to us first by the regulated community, their projections of what their income is going to look like, and projections as to how many registrations and CPG applications we expect to get from those who are not paying a gross receipts tax, suggests that this is a transition period. By, say, 2030, if you look at the projections from those companies and from the Department of Public Service, you will see that the amount of income expected by the utilities who are in the electricity business, and that's the largest part of our gross receipts tax income, are going to go up significantly as we shift from gas cars to electric cars, as we shift from fossil fuel heat to electric heat, as we see other changes take place. And so if we were projecting, and we have not attempted to do this systematically, but if we were projecting out, we're confident that by 2030, this deficit situation will have been fixed and that our income will meet our budget obligations. In the meantime, the reserve allows us to continue to do our job as effectively as possible without being constrained by some budget limitation.
Thank you. So when was the last time your fees were increased?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me about 3 years ago, we had a review of the gross receipts tax, which incidentally, up until that time, I may be wrong about the year, it was a fixed number, and it was then shared 60% for the Department of Public Service and 40% for the Public Utility Commission. At the time of the change, it was the same gross receipts tax number was used, but it was allocated to each of us separately, so that our percentage is not exactly 40% and the department's not exactly 60%. And that was done for 1 year and stays in place until either we or the department come forward and say, we think we need more, or we don't think we need as much as the case may be. But Anne, what year did those changes occur?
In FY19 is when the changes were made to the gross receipts tax that you're describing. And at that time, there was an increase in the rate paid by natural gas utilities to make it the same. It was increased to make it the same as the rate paid by electric utilities. And FY19 was also when the application fees were implemented for the first time.
And just to be clear, the application fees are paid only by applicants for CPGs, certificates of public good, who are not already paying the gross receipts tax.
May I have a follow-up?
Sure.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And then back to the first part of the question, and I apologize for the long-winded double-part question initially. Sometimes get lost in those questions. But the first one pertaining to the opportunity cost of dipping into the reserves, and I guess we're suggesting that 2030 is a number of years away. So to relying on that reserve fund to fix a deficit for that long of a period during a time where I would think that we would want the flexibility to look at issues that are coming up, such as the aging of the grid or greater demand in maybe southern New England, and what's Vermont's role in meeting that, or whether it's looking at Hydro-Quebec or RECs or the differences between the renewable energy credits, or you name it. There's, I think in the energy field, there's, from my limited knowledge, I would imagine that there's such an important suite of issues, and we would want to rely on that special fund. Can you just respond a little bit or reflect on that opportunity cost if we're to rely on a reserve fund for an extended period of time, assuming that we're going to be out of a hole in 6 years from now, 7 years from now?
Okay, sure. We do keep an eye on the very issue that you're raising, which is, are we dipping into the reserve to the point where we won't have the reserve that we need, and at some point we'll have to either fail to do something that we should do or have to stop doing something that we do because there won't be enough in the reserve to cover the deficit. Our best thinking at this point is that that's not on our horizon. To date, our reserve, even with the use of it, we have seen years when it has increased from its original number. So that in the course of the years, starting with FY17, the size of that reserve, even while we have been dipping into it to make up budget deficits, has actually increased. So we're watching the kinds of issues that you're talking about, and of course, many of those items that you listed are expenses that are not of the Public Utility Commission, but of the people who we regulate. So, for example, the rate that our electric utilities charge their customers is impacted by the southern New England's increasing grid costs. But the total in New England of those costs are spread among the states based upon usage. And Vermont is about 10%. So we are not absorbing any significant percentage of those costs in the state. And again, it's not a cost that the Utility Commission is incurring. We regulate it, but we don't pay it. I'm not sure whether I've answered your question or not. I mean, maybe the short answer is we don't think we're yet at the point where that is something that is going to impact us, but we keep an eye on it. And Operations Director Ann Bishop is particularly sensitive to us not starting to use any significant percentage of the reserve to meet what are basically daily operating costs. And if that happened, if it looked like we were coming to that, we would need to come back and request an increase in the gross receipts tax or the filing fees to get our income up closer to what our operating expenses are.
Thank you.
Representative Page, was your hand up or? No, okay.
Just scratching my head.
Okay. I saw it out of the corner of my eye. Go ahead.
Two more questions, if I may, and feel free to reach out to me with any supplemental information, but I would like to know, just to flag that, so you could reach out to me at a later time, the whole issue about the merit increases. I know that your staff, your hearing officers are exempt employees, and we obviously have and benefit from having that institutional memory and staff to retain staff. So if you could provide more information about how long you've had annual merit increases and why this year it changed. I'd like to get more information about that at some point.
Sure, we'll be happy to give you. How many years back would you like us to go? I mean, we can go back as far as you like. And give you the history of the merit increases.
You could decide whatever you feel to help illustrate how that's a useful tool for you for retaining of your talent. So that would be.
All right, we'll be happy to do that. And then if once you see what we send to the committee, there's additional information that you'd like to have, or even have us come back, we're more than happy to do that.
Then my other question has to do with the statistics you offered in the beginning of your presentation that talked about given your existing capacity, the percentages of achieving or completing your cases in delivering or issuing your orders or certificates by the deadline of that particular proceeding. And I think one number came to mind was 93%, you had indicated. So I guess my overarching question is whether you have the resources to meet that expectations and meeting those statutory deadlines pertaining to your proceedings. Is that acceptable?
I'm sorry.
That was, I just would appreciate it either now or at a later date in a communications to me, what your objective is for your performance, and have you achieved your performance objectives?
Okay, well, the short answer is that we have achieved them. We review them fairly frequently to make sure that they match up with what we believe are the appropriate standards. There is one statute that has set a particular performance deadline for us with regard to net metering cases. That is that we should complete the review of net metering cases in 90 days if the case is uncontested. In other words, if no one has raised any issues and all we need to do is do a review. Other than that, the deadlines are ones that, and Ann can talk more about this, but they're deadlines modeled after deadlines that state and federal courts have set for courts to meet how long from the time a proceeding is started by filing with the appropriate court to how long it takes the court to resolve those. But Anne, is there anything that you'd like to add in response to the question?
Sure. As Chair Roisman mentioned, some of these are statutory deadlines, but they're not all statutory deadlines. They're deadlines that we have internally established for the resolution of cases. And we follow the model that courts use, including the Vermont judiciary. And there are, that model recognizes that different types of cases and even types of cases that are the same type have different levels of complexity. And so there, we'd be happy to provide you with the information leading to and showing you how we calculated them and what those time standards are. One of the things that the National Center for State Courts, which is the group that developed the model for this time to disposition performance standard, it will say that if you achieve 80 to 85% of your cases within your desired timeframes, you're doing a pretty good job. So we feel that there will always be outliers. In particular, you know, one of our goals is we need to make sure that we're providing appropriate process to all the parties who are participating in those cases, and that is more important than meeting the time frame that's not a statutory time frame that's a goal. And so we don't expect to ever actually achieve 100% on this performance metric, but we feel that the results that we're getting are reasonable, recognizing that there will always be some outliers.
And let me just add to that, and this goes back to the question about merit increases. Our ability to meet what are fairly stringent performance standards is directly impacted by the quality of the people we have working for us. These 14 hearing officers, half of whom are attorneys and half of whom are analysts, that is, they don't have law degrees and they have degrees in economics or in various other technical areas. They're not only knowledgeable and skillful, but like any real professional, they're efficient and they're able to move through these cases, identify the issues that need extra attention. And all of that is facilitated by work, again, done by Anne in creating a system of templates that include language that appears in every one of our orders and helps the hearing officer complete their initial proposal for decision, and helps inform the commission when we review those proposals and take final action. If we didn't have the quality of the staff doing the work, the ability of us to meet those performance standards would be degraded. And in that case, we might need two people to do something that a more qualified one person would have been able to do on their own. We have not faced that yet. Every time we have been filling vacancies, we have been fortunate in getting a robust and high quality applicants, and have often not only chosen the best, but have had to turn down people who were extremely well qualified, and often they ended up getting hired by other agencies who were interested in similar talent.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Representative Pat, do you have any questions? Please feel free to be a part of our committee.
Thank you. I did have been getting back to the application fees. Does the PUC set those fees, or is that you need to get approval for those fees?
And why don't you explain, because the fees are actually collected by the Department of Public Service, and then allocated between that department and the commission?
The fees are set in statute, and the statute provides that the commission gets 40% and the Department of Public Service gets 60%. And as Chair Royceman mentioned, the department is actually the one that collects the fees.
Thank you.
So you get 40%.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay, great. Well, we're all set. Thank you very much for coming in and
Okay.
presenting your budget. And this is Representative Dolan's area, and so we'll filter questions through her, and I'm sure she will bring back some of the initiatives or things that are gaps to our attention.
Thank you all very much for your interest in our work. And when our hearing room is completed, we'll have a grand opening and everyone will be invited. We can't promise food and certainly not drink, but you may want to participate by using our remote connection to see just how well it works. Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. You're welcome, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Or we'll just, maybe if we're ready, we just bring them. Would you like a minute?
You got 3 minutes.
Before we go?
What if we set up the technology and we're ready to rock?
All right.